First item in the open session today is for me a touch poignant. And I'm going to read something and I'm going to ad-lib a little bit and you'll know when I'm ad-libbing, I think. Frank B. Hundley. Whereas we, your colleagues and friends, wish to gratefully acknowledge your passion and commitment to Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, as a member of the Board of Governors since July 1, 2016. And whereas you have proudly served your alma mater, first as a member of the Board of Trustees from 2009 to 2016, serving as Vice Chair of the Board of Trustees in fiscal year 14 and Chair in fiscal year 15. And whereas you have admirably chaired the Governor's Committee on Academic and Student Affairs, championing the highest academic standards and continuously advocating for students, faculty, and alumni. And whereas you have provided sound guidance to the university through your participation on the Board of Governors Executive and Athletic Committees, the Joint Committee on Investments, and as an ex officio member of the Board of Trustees Nominating Committee, where you ensured that appointments to the Board of Governors consisted of strong, capable leaders who shared your passion for our alma mater. And whereas you have staunchly supported all Rutgers locations through your exemplary service as a member of the Camden Board of Directors for 3 years, including 2 years as chair, and as a member of the Rowan University Rutgers Camden Board of Governors. And whereas you have further demonstrated your unwavering commitment to the university through your astute and wise counsel as a governor member of the Rutgers 21st Presidential Search Committee, through your praiseworthy efforts as president of the Rutgers Alumni Association, and through your prudent advice to numerous high-level search committees throughout the university. And whereas your vast knowledge of the history of the university and its governing boards is inspiring, and your dedication of your time, talent, and treasure to Rutgers has immeasurably enhanced the success and reputation of the university and models the very definition of giving back to one's alma mater. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Board of Governors of Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, warmly and appreciatively express their deepest gratitude and heartfelt thanks to you, Frank B. Hundley, for your distinguished service on the Board of Governors, and extends sincere warm wishes for the future as we look forward to your continued wisdom and guidance as an emeritus member of the Board of Trustees. And there's more. You may be leaving the board after 12 years of remarkably distinguished service, maybe a little more, actually. But you're not allowed to give up the tailgate, okay? Because what else would we have to do on those Saturdays? In addition, I have the privilege of recalling a conversation with you now many years ago when we talked about the future of our alma mater, and you modeled it on the past, present, and future of your other alma mater, the University of California at Berkeley. What you said was, and you didn't use the words, "This is what excellence looks like," because that was to come a bit later. What you said was, you know, there's Berkeley, it's the University of Michigan. You omitted to say there's UCLA. I had to learn that from our president as well. And there's Rutgers, and that's the conversation in which this university should be discussed. And son of a gun, now 5 years later, 6 years later, 4 years later, in there somewhere, here we are with a splendid new president, not so new anymore, who, thanks to the role that you played in selecting him, has turned this place upside down for the better. And he's still just getting started. I don't know how better to thank you, Frank Hundley, than with this resolution, but we'll find a way. Thank you, thank you, thank you. God bless you, Frank B. Hundley. From the pizza guy. Is there a second? Second. Thank you. Any objections to conferring this honor on our brother Frank? Motion is passed. Mr. President, the floor is yours.
Very much. I have prepared remarks here, very brief ones, but since we've just had the much-deserved recognition celebration of Frank Hundley, and earlier, before going into closed session, the much-deserved generous acknowledgement of John Oliver, I will simply add, it's a brief comment, and its brevity should not be mistaken for its sincerity. Presidents occupy, in higher ed in general, lonely positions. We do not have friends. It's the nature of the job. Frank Hundley and John Oliver are my friends. Thank you. I want to turn now to my matters before the board. I want to thank all of you for all the work that you've done during an important year of transition for Rutgers, moving from the emergency online arrangement, a remote arrangement, to being back in person. Still quite a journey for all of us. Certainly for me in my still newish, but not yet new, no longer new position as president. I want to thank all of those who were able to participate last month in our various commencement celebrations. It was for me in person, of course, for the first time, a tremendous experience. I'm so proud to have been a part of it in New Brunswick, Camden, and Newark. The energy of the return for those particular events was really quite remarkable and is a well-deserved celebration of our incredible graduates. We've had exciting news in athletics. This is without asterisks at all, the finest year in general for Rutgers athletics. Most recently, the success of the men's lacrosse team in making it to the Final Four in lacrosse. Baseball had an outstanding season during which we were robbed, I will say that, about getting access into the tournament. And women's basketball, we are blessed with a quite remarkable new coach, Coquise Washington. And I will say in general, the fact that, yes, men's lacrosse making it to the Final Four, women's lacrosse, I watched them play and having tremendous success in the pouring rain, beating Northwestern for the first time in 17 efforts in the Big Ten Championship. The fact that we can say in Rutgers that we are angry about coming close to winning the Big Ten on 5 different occasions, winning it once out of 5 times, that we're angry about being robbed from being part of postseason play. That's a new level of privilege for Rutgers athletics, and we should call attention to it. But next year, we'll just win them all, so that's fine. In late May, I met with the students in the first cohort of the Rutgers Summer Service Internship Initiative, the one that grew out of my op-ed from last July on public service that I announced as an initiative at my inauguration. They are so incredibly impressive. Remember that we had 5 times the number of applicants that we were able to support through fellowships, through these internships. This program is going to grow. I'm convinced of it. I'm committed to it. And the work that these students are doing, students coming from backgrounds where they could literally not afford to take an unpaid internship, the fact that we're able to provide the means for them to take these internships and the way they are serving the community is exactly what a Rutgers student should be doing. I'm proud to have that they've taken it up, and I was honored to meet the ones that I did. I received the report and recommendations of the Future of Work Task Force, which was studying how we might take lessons learned from the pandemic to establish a new set of protocols revolving around work. This is a highly complicated area. There are no universities, no institutions free of the complications of whatever future work looks for at their particular place. We'll be announcing next steps later this week on that front. Finally, we have a number of academic leaders at Rutgers who will be stepping down and moving to new opportunities, and I want to publicly thank them for their service. Camden Provost Dan Hart, Newark Provost Ashwani Monga, New Brunswick Vice Provost Ingrid Fulmer, SAS New Brunswick Executive Dean Peter March, Engineering Dean Tom Ferris, Sky Dean Jonathan Potter, Douglas Residential College Dean Jackie Litt, and New Brunswick Honors College Administrative Dean Paul Gilmore. All have served the university in impressive and important ways. And they are heading off into new opportunities, some at Rutgers, some to retirement, and some to different universities. But regardless of their next steps, I want to thank them all for their contributions to this university. Those conclude my comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. We now have 10 speakers from the public, including 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 students from New Brunswick and from Newark. Thank you all for signing up to speak. We look forward to your remarks. Please keep them on point, and also please observe the 2-minute limitation. First up, Madam Secretary, Mr. Oscar Villar, student from SAS in New Brunswick.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
We have a little bit of an echo, but please proceed.
Sorry, yes, we're having some technical difficulties here. So
No
I
worries.
signed up to speak for on Article 11A, which I'm pretty sure, as you're all familiar with, is the point regarding the budget and whatnot. And so, as a student, from what I'm aware, the budget from the previous academic year to this past academic year was about a 2.6% increase. And obviously, President Holloway, you've promised not to raise tuition at all because, you know, inflation is ravaging this country like never before. We're all aware of the current global situation right now, and it's hurting us, especially at home, since we are one of the primary funders of, you know, of what's going on in the world right now. But to get back to my point, and this also ties into point 11B as well, but I would like to primarily focus on 11A since that is what I signed up for. And this is more so of a rhetorical question, but I would hope that the board keeps this in mind when, you know, when proceeding with this meeting and approving of all the resolutions. If we have this inflation and our budget is consistently increasing, but incrementally, of course, but still nonetheless increasing, right? But with all this inflation and with the fact that Rutgers has to keep on increasing its budget and increasing tuition to be in good standing as a university than just as a student. And this baffles me really. I would just like to know really how do you sustain that? How do you maintain such, you know, a budget? Because quite frankly, even as a student, even looking at all of these numbers and all of these documents, it's not really sustainable at all. And the people who are going to hurt most of this are the students, because about a quarter of all of Rutgers funding comes from tuition and fees and all that stuff. And that doesn't even include, you know, all the other expenses that students pay that go directly to the university as well. So it's just something to consider. I doubt you would personally, and anyone on the board really. I don't care if that offends you, because quite frankly, that's the truth and I'm tired. But just please consider that. And I hope for anyone else in the public who's somehow hearing me, please consider that as well, and that these people do not have your best intentions in mind, and that things are only going to get worse for us. Thank you.
Thank you for your thoughtful and obviously heartfelt remarks, Mr. Villar. I would be remiss if I did not say on President Holloway's behalf, and he certainly can speak for himself, that he made no such representation publicly. And if he made it to you privately, I certainly wasn't present for it. Also, your 2.6 isn't quite right. It's 2.9, but who's counting? Thank you. Next, Mr. David Horan, student from the Newark College of Arts and Sciences.
Yes, hello. My name is David Horan, Newark College of Arts and Science. I'm a journalism major. I would like to point out I have a tap into article right here that is literally headlined. Rutgers Holloway says tuition will not be raised to meet rising inflation and salaries. So on that, you are simply wrong. Furthermore, I'm here to speak on point 11B. That is, in fact, tuition raises. For years now, tuition at this school has risen in relation to the rising rankings of the school. This school is currently embroiled in a lawsuit. This lawsuit alleges that the business school in particular used a scheme whereby it hired former students back at the school to artificially increase its rankings. This is a scam the school is willingly or unwillingly party to, that has paired with tuition increases. In this sense, the justification to increase tuition is none. It is zero. Furthermore, much student money, the article I read says about $10 million of student tuition funds go to repaying the athletic department's debt. The athletic department that, Mr. Holloway, you waxed so poetically about just a minute ago. As you all well know, this athletic department is little more than a black hole of debt, whereby money continually is thrown into it and no returns are found. To raise tuition then on either of these grounds, to throw our money away so freely and so willingly, this is foolish. And, well, to continue foolish behavior implicates nobody but those who continue doing it. That is all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Horan, for your remarks. Mr. Sitant Srivastava, please, student from SAS.
Hello, I just wanted to ask about the Rutgers dining department or dining services, because during the pandemic, there are obviously massive layoffs of staff. And since then, there's been understaffing issues due in large part to the low starting pay and lack of ability to earn tips. Are there any plans in place in this budget to help ease that issue and have help the dining department get back into full staffing? Because this is adversely impacting students, and that a lot of locations haven't opened yet, or they have shorter hours or less services. So I just want to ask if the board has any plans to sort of help get back to full staffing by fall, because we've been trying to be a fully open university for a whole year, but it's hard to be fully open when you're not full staffing. So I was wondering if there's any plans in this budget to help address that issue.
Thank you for your remarks, Mr. Srivastava. I now call on Mr. Alan Charan, a lecturer in philosophy at SAS, please.
Hi, I'm speaking regarding to agenda point 11A of next year's budget. As a first-year adjunct, it's been amazing for me to witness in just that 1 year two fantastic and outstanding examples of Rutgers living up to its ethical commitments. The first is with a professor that I know of who is in some difficulty for a social justice commitment, and Rutgers really went out of their way to support that professor. And the second was one of my own students who, if you remember the fall flooding, she was actually living in a hotel room with her whole family and having difficulties, of course, trying to keep up with classes. And Rutgers just very quickly and easily responded to her situation and got her a dorm room for free, potentially saving her college career. But it was just another great example of Rutgers living up to its commitment and doing it quietly and in a way that I had never heard of before, or that was not publicized, is what I was trying to say. So now with the very important issue of the adjunct faculty contract coming up, and being that 1/3 of the classes at Rutgers are taught by adjunct faculty, and yet the overall budget is less than 1% that goes towards our salaries, I just am expressing hope that Rutgers can again live up to its ethical standards and its goals in coming up with a better contract for its adjunct faculty. and a contract that we can all be proud of and that will set an example for, once again, for a large group of people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Mr. David Letwin, please, lecturer at Rutgers Arts Online in New Brunswick.
Good afternoon. My name is David Letwin. I have been teaching at Rutgers since the fall of 2003. I'm currently an adjunct or part-time lecturer for Rutgers Arts Online at the Mason Gross School of the Arts. I'm also on the executive board of the Rutgers PTL Union. My comments are connected to agenda item 11.A, proposed resolution on the fiscal year 2022-23 budget. Rutgers adjuncts are underpaid, lack job security, often teach large classes with no TA support, and are not covered through the university healthcare plan. This exploitative arrangement makes stable, sustainable employment seem like an impossible dream, while exacerbating broader gender and racial inequalities. There is no possible budgetary justification for denying fair terms of employment to PTLs, who are as committed and as qualified as our full-time peers. Although we teach roughly 30% of the courses at Rutgers, as someone just noted, our total salaries comprise less than 1% of the budget at a university with an endowment valued as of December 31st, 2021 at $1.98 billion. As Rutgers governors, there are two immediate steps you can take to help redress this injustice. First, make clear to President Holloway that you support our current contract demands for equal pay for equal work, job security, and healthcare coverage. And second, call on the president to respect the democratic will of our members and recognize our merger with the full-time and graduate student union and the biomedical and health sciences union. The quality of education provided to students suffers when their teachers are treated as disposable second-class members of what Rutgers President Holloway calls beloved community. The money is there to remedy the problem. Please stand with Rutgers' primary mission and support just working conditions for Rutgers adjuncts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Letwin. Dr. Kevin Keegan of the Sociology and Anthropology departments in Newark. Dr. Keegan.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. My name is Kevin Keogan. I'm an adjunct faculty member at Rutgers and the interim Newark vice president for the Rutgers Part-Time Lecturers Union. I'm here to address agenda item 11A, the proposed resolution on the fiscal year 2022-23 budget. As a long-term employee at Rutgers and former student, I'm concerned about the choices and priorities reflected in Rutgers' recent fiscal budgets. Specifically, I want to call into question the lack of funding for my fellow PTLs who provide crucial labor without fair compensation. This fact is reflected in Rutgers' budget in terms of the increasingly large reserves it has amassed and in the minuscule proportion of the budget that goes to adjunct salaries. Adjunct faculty teach over 30% of Rutgers courses, yet comprise less than 1% of Rutgers' budget. All budgets must distinguish between necessities and discretionary spending, but Rutgers is a public university with a core mission to provide quality higher education to its students. Rutgers should do whatever is possible to provide all faculty with a stable work environment, fair wages and benefits, so they can focus on teaching students. This is not the case for poorly paid adjuncts who have to reapply for their positions every semester and are offered no health benefits. In 2020, the New Jersey State Legislature recognized this untenable situation and passed SCR 185, a resolution that urges New Jersey institutions of higher education to take action on ensuring rights such as pay parity for contingent faculty. Likewise, Rutgers University Senate recently passed a resolution on pay equity and recognition for adjunct faculty. This resolution passed easily without debate and calls for equal pay, job security, and health benefits for Rutgers adjuncts. This past spring, our union and the Rutgers Full-Time Faculty Graduate Student Union embarked on a campaign to address these issues through a merger of our bargaining units to form one faculty. Over 1,100 adjunct faculty members signed cards in support of this effort. We want our merger recognized. When we reached this majority in May, we asked President Holloway to recognize this merger so that we can bargain as one faculty and begin to address his own reported concerns regarding adjunctification. President Holloway can anytime voluntarily accept the will of a majority of adjunct faculty, but instead he has deferred to his lawyers. As we begin bargaining for our next contract, we come before the Board of Governors to ask that you recognize the need for a healthy work environment that treats all faculty fair and equitably. Rutgers' budget must reflect
You're way over time. Forgive me, sir. It would be good if you stop speaking now. You're at 3.5 minutes. Are you nearly done? Thank you for your remarks. Mr. Howard Swerdloff from the Rutgers writing program in New Brunswick. Mr. Swerdloff, sir. Mr. Swerdloff, you have been unmuted from here. If you're speaking, we can't hear you. We'll come back to you in a sec. Dr. Paul O'Keefe, assistant teaching professor at SAS in New Brunswick. Dr. O'Keefe. Okay, gentlemen, you need to unmute yourselves in order to address us. Okay, we'll come back again. Dr. Joshua, forgive me, I'm going to mangle this, Butcher, associate professor at the RWJ Emergency Medicine in New Brunswick. Dr. Butcher.
Hi, thank you for giving me the opportunity. I just wanted to bring a concern to the Board of Governors. I'm not sure you guys are fully aware about hiring at the medical school / Barnabas side. So there's a term in the merger called the clinically focused university practitioners, where physician faculty who are hired that primarily work clinically, that do not have a dedicated research or education role, are hired on a 90% Barnabas scale, 10% Rutgers scale, meaning that they are hired outside of the collective bargaining agreement. They are not subject to the union. And this is creating large divisions among faculty, especially in our department in emergency medicine, which is going to begin hiring some of these faculty as professional practice. I don't really understand what the obvious purpose behind the hiring is, since Barnabas provides the funds to pay Rutgers to pay their medical school faculty. So from the Barnabas side, it wouldn't really matter if they were paying faculty directly or if they were paying Rutgers to pay faculty directly. The only possible explanation here is that this can be considered union busting, since these professional practice track hires will lose access to the union since they are less than 50% Rutgers employees. I think Rutgers needs to put an end to this. This is a unique hiring practice that does not exist anywhere else in the country. And if we're going to be the premier academic institution of New Jersey, we need to continue and hire faculty as Rutgers hires. That way they contribute to the Rutgers mission. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Diomedes Tsitsouras, please, Executive Director of the AAUP at the New Jersey Medical School at RBHS.
Hi, yes, I'd like to elaborate on Dr. Bashir's comments. I am the Executive Director of the AAUP BHSNJ. We represent 1,400 faculty on the RBHS side of the university, and particularly this hiring practice of hiring clinically focused university practitioners through Barnabas is, hurting our union in that we've been losing at least 68 to 78 members over the last 2 years, given that the university is using the Barnabas payroll to hire them essentially as full-time faculty members with full titles. But on paper, it looks like they're barely part-time, and so they don't qualify for our representation. And so we have faculty members, working in the same buildings, seeing the same patients, billing the same way, but they're in a completely different category. And also the other implications of this part-time status is that they can't participate fully in university life, vote in faculty senate, maybe even benefits like tuition remission are not afforded to them because policy says that tuition remission is for full-time faculty. Again, we would like the university to stop this practice immediately and do hiring through Rutgers, and that would make sure that everyone has treated the same respect and dignity. And one last point, to be clear, I mean, we are not opposed to the Rutgers or Barnabas affiliation. I think a lot of good could come of that partnership, but it should not be used for avoiding collective bargaining. With that, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your remarks. I'm going to go back to two who had difficulty unmuting the first time around. First, Mr. Howard Swerdlove from the Rutgers Writing Program. Second, Dr. Paul O'Keefe from the School of Arts and Sciences.
Oh, right. Okay. Now, this is Paul O'Keefe. I'm full-time NTT faculty in geography at the Livingston campus. And today I'd like to speak to the same agenda item that others have on the budget. Specifically, I would like to discuss my experience of what I think is a really important principle, which is that of equal pay for equal work in the context of our multiple bargaining units. I really like my job at Rutgers. I'm very fortunate to educate and help deliver Rutgers' core educational mission. And I'm rewarded with healthcare and benefits, as well as a livable salary in some parts of Jersey for it. And it's really shocked me observing the bargaining process for our contract negotiations to hear from PTLs who do not just a similar teaching load from me, but do a lot of the service obligations, again, fulfilling the absolute core of Rutgers' educational mission. This isn't the margins, it's not the extra bits. It's the entire system depends on hyper exploitation of PTL work. And it's frankly something I really struggle to support. Obviously, the contract negotiations are ongoing, but I do hope at this point you could at least indicate your support for the broad principle of equal pay for equal work. And one thing you could do very easily would be support our unit's desire to merge and bargain collectively. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your remarks, Dr. O'Keefe. And thank you again to all the speakers. Mr. President, any words from you?
Thank you. Very briefly, I do feel obliged to address in particular the first two students who said that I promised never raise tuition. The second student, quoting the headline from the Tap Into article, I'll quote the full title of the article. Rutgers president says tuition will not be raised to meet rising inflation. The full title of the article makes clear what is also said in the first 2 or 3 sentences of the article, which is true. I said we would not raise tuition to meet inflation because that would mean raising tuition 7.7% at the point of time when I announced this in my financial address. So I would ask the students to be more thorough in their research when they are making claims about, well, one student referred to us as foolishness. So I will just challenge that declaration. And to make it clear, you're absolutely right in terms of the fact that tuition covers a significant amount of the cost of, contributes to the budget, up to 1/3 of it. And we will not raise tuition to meet the level of tuition. In some ways, I would love to do it because I would solve financial problems that would allow us to do many other things that have already been raised in the other by the other members of this the public session without going into detail. But it is politically impossible. It is fiscally irresponsible. And so we have to walk the tightrope. One of the students said the budget is unsustainable given its structure. I will agree with you. And one of the ways that we're going to try to change that is regular and consistent lobbying with our friends in the the governor's office and the legislature to do our very best to help them understand the vital role that Rutgers education plays in the state economy. This is a problem not of our making. This is a problem that goes back decades across higher education, across the nation, of the defunding of higher education. I'm not happy about it, but this is where we are right now in terms of trying to meet the cost of running a first-rate research university. So this, I'm quite sympathetic to the pain of rising tuitions, especially in a time of rising inflation. But the fact that the Board of Governors has approved a 2.9% increase in tuition instead of what is more probably fiscally responsible, if I'm being cold-hearted, of 5 to 7%, speaks to how much the Board of Governors do care about everybody involved in the institution. I share that care as well. As far as the other members who spoke about issues relating to part-time lecturers, labor arrangements and such, because we're about to head into negotiations, it is irresponsible for me to comment further on it. But I will say to one, I forget which person raised the question that essentially suggested I was, instead of coming forward and just making a declaration, turning to my attorneys. My attorneys, that's actually good practice. I lean on the experts on the topic, and in this case, it's the experts in the Office of University Labor Relations that I created so we could have a consistent singular voice focusing on labor relations so that we could get to a place of better conversations, more honest conversations, conversations stripped of theater, so that we can actually move forward and and provide the best possible working relationship for all the people who work so hard on Rutgers' behalf, on our students' behalf, on the behalf of the administration. So yes, I will go back to my attorneys because that is what good executive leadership does. Thank you.
President, our general counsel, John Hoffman, and the head of President Holloway's new labor office, David Cohen, have the full faith of this Board of Governors. Moving on, election of officers of the board for 2022-2023. I would ask my dear friend and faithful Vice Chair, Bill Best, if he would kindly briefly leave the room so that we can do some business without creating a conflict for him. Thank you, sir. On behalf of the Executive Committee, I present the following nomination for Chair of the Board of Governors for the term July 1, 2022 to June 30, 2023. William E. Best. Please may I have a motion? Thank you. A second?
Second.
Objections? Okay, hearing none, Mr. Best is elected effective July 1. There we go. Thank you, sir. Well done, Assistant Secretary Malillo. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask Mr. Best if he would briefly hold the gavel while I leave the room.
Mr. Chair. On behalf of the Executive Committee, I present the following nomination for Vice Chair of the Board of Governors for the term July 1, 2022 to June 30th, 2023. The Chair and now the Vice Chair-elect, Mark A. Engelson. I'll entertain a motion. Any discussion? Second. Oh. Second, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you.
On behalf of the Executive Committee, I present the following nominations for officers of the Board of Governors for the term July 1, 2022 to June 30, 2023. Secretary Kimberly M. Pastva, Treasurer J. Michael Gower, Associate Secretary Patrick L. Melillo. Please, would you close your ears, each of you, while we vote on you. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Motion carries. I'm going to now present the following nominations for officers of the University Corporation for the same period. And they are the same officers, Ms. Pastva, Mr. Gower, and Mr. Melillo. Please, may I have a motion? Thank you. Second? Any objections? Motion carries. Now, an election to the Board of Governors member of the Camden Board of Directors. Ms. DiMartino, please, would you close your ears or mute yourself somehow so that we can do our business around you? I present the following nomination for the Board of Governors member of the Camden Board of Directors for the term coterminous with Ms. DiMartino's term on the Board of Governors. Mary I. DiMartino, 2025. Please, may I have a motion?
So move.
Second?
Second.
Any objections? Motion carries. It is now my pleasure, sort of, to call on Chair Hundley of the Committee on Academic and Student Affairs for his final report in that capacity. Mr. Hundley, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Committee on Academic and Student Affairs met on June 13th, 2022. The meeting was held in person here and virtually via Zoom. It was called to order at 1 p.m. and finished at 3 p.m. There was a proposed resolution that Rutgers Newark Chancellor Nancy Cantor presented, establishing the Bachelor of Arts in ESL and bilingual urban education at the School of Arts and Sciences in Newark. Chancellor Cantor described the program as a 46-credit standalone degree-granting major and noted that it is one of the first of programs of its kind in New Jersey. The committee agreed to endorse the resolution for board approval, and it has been placed on today's consent agenda. Next up, Chancellor Cantor also presented the proposed resolution establishing the Bachelor of Arts in Urban Secondary Education, which he described as a 37-credit reimagined dual major program that focuses on social justice and equity for K through 12 students. She explained that students in the program will study an academic content area major and the dual major part in urban education with professional education courses that urban educators need to become culturally responsive. The committee also agreed to endorse that resolution for board approval. It's also been placed on today's consent agenda. The last consent item, it was presented by Rutgers Camden Chancellor Antonio Tillis, who presented a proposed resolution establishing the Department of Health Sciences in the Camden College of Arts and Sciences. Chancellor Tillis noted that since its launch in 2014, the Bachelor of Arts in Health Sciences at Rutgers Camden has become one of the two most popular undergraduate majors at the campus, with enrollment growing from 50 to more than 500 students since then. The committee agreed to endorse the resolution for board approval. It's been placed on today's consent agenda. Matters for information. University Secretary Kimberly Pastva provided the committee with a review of the open hearing on the university's tuition, fees, and housing, which was held on April 27, 2022, both in person and at the College Avenue Student Center and virtually via Zoom. Next, Chancellor Tillis reviewed the Postmaster's Nurse Educator Certificate Program at the School of Nursing Camden, designed for master's or doctoral prepared nurses who are interested in teaching in clinical classroom or online settings. Those currently working in academia who wish to advance their knowledge regarding best practices and current issues in nursing education, and individuals who want to meet the requirements to sit for the National League of Nursing Certificate in Nursing Education. Chancellor Cantor then announced that the Department of African American and African Studies has voted to change its name to the Department of Africana Studies, reflecting the fact that the department's scholarly work and research focus has expanded to broadly define the African American, African, and African diaspora over the last 10 years, and that the name change applies to both the department and the Bachelor of Arts degree. The committee then met in an executive session to discuss personnel matters, including faculty tenure appointment recommendations. The committee also agreed to endorse the following appointments for board consideration: naming Dr. Andrew Ruzhensky as Board of Governors Professor of Business, naming Dr. Eileen White as Board of Governors Professor of Molecular Biology and Biochemistry, naming Dr. Roxanne Gay as the second Gloria Steinem Endowed Chair in Media, Culture, and Feminist Studies, appointing Dr. Perry Halkidis, Dean of the School of Public Health, to the Hunterdon Endowed Professorship of Public Health and Health Equity, and appointing Dr. Daniel Hart, Provost and Executive Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs at Rutgers Camden, as a university professor. The committee agreed to endorse these recommendations for board approval, and they have been placed on today's consent agenda. This concludes the report on the Committee of Academic and Student Affairs.
Thank you, Chair Hundley. Thank you very much. Chair Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Committee on Finance and Facilities met on June 7th. The Board of Governors Committee on Finance and Facilities plays a crucial role in the university's annual budget process. The proposed budget was presented in detail by the university administration and discussed by the committee at its June 7th meeting. Committee members analyzed and questioned the budget assumptions to understand and endorse the proposed budget and the administration's recommendations for tuition, fees, and room and board rates for the upcoming academic year. Under Matters for Action, Mr. David Moore, Associate Vice President, Financial Planning and Budgeting and Chief Budget Officer, presented for endorsement the proposed resolution to approve the university's consolidated budget of $5.1 billion for fiscal year 22-23. He explained the key revenue and expense items that resulted in variance from the third quarter forecast for fiscal year 2021-22. In addition to the total university budget, the presentation included detailed budget presentations for each of the four chancellor units and for central administration. I now ask Mr. Moore to review the key points from the budget presentation. Mr. Moore.
Thank you. Thank you. I will begin the presentation with an overview of the total university's proposed revenue and expense budgets in order to set the context for the remainder of the presentation. The proposed budget reflects the values of the university in fulfilling its core priorities of teaching, research, service, and clinical care. The budget reflects a statement of our priorities while providing a recognition of our fiscal realities that we face in fiscal year 2023. The proposed budget will spend approximately $5.1 billion on the things that are most important to us. Over 77% of the budget will be spent on our core missions of student instruction, research, public service, and patient care. Approximately 15.2% is spent on operation and maintenance for our facilities and for administration. 4.8% is spent on auxiliary enterprises, which primarily includes housing, dining, and parking operations, and 2.7% is spent on athletics. So now let's explore some of the categories for a deeper understanding. Our core mission are made up of the following: classroom instruction and academic support, includes faculty compensation and staff support for academic units, libraries, and dean's offices. This accounts for approximately $1.6 billion, or 32.3% of the annual budget. Student services and scholarships include financial aid, admissions, and social and cultural events for students that account for $588.2 million, or 11.6% of the budget. Sponsor research and other sponsor program activities includes funds spent on research and activities associated with federal, state, non-governmental grants and contracts, which accounts for approximately 12.9% of the annual budget. Public service, extension, and patient care includes agricultural extension programs, delivery of health care, support of health clinics, and community services provided throughout the state, which accounts for over $1 billion, or 20.5% of the annual budget. Together, these items represent the core missions of the student instruction, research, public service, and patient care that account for over $3.8 billion, or over 77% of the annual budget. Rounding out the remaining 23% of the annual budget, general administration, which supports central administrative offices such as research administration, finance, human resources, procurement, and legal, for examples. This accounts for approximately 10.5% of the annual budget. Operations and maintenance of all Rutgers buildings, including insurance, fuel, upkeep, and utility costs, account for $241.4 million, or 4.7% of the budget. Auxiliary enterprises, which includes housing, dining, and parking operations, account for approximately 4.8% of the annual budget. And athletics, which includes the 24 men's and women's Division I sports programs at Rutgers, New Brunswick, account for approximately $135.9 million, or 2.7% of the budget. Let's now turn to where the funding comes from. Approximately 20% of the revenues come from tuition and fees. Patient care services include revenues from governmental payers, private insurers, and affiliated agreements for patient care. It accounts for approximately 21.5% of the annual revenue budget. Just over 20% of the university revenues come from the state of New Jersey, some in unrestricted operating support, and a portion to cover the cost of fringe benefits for some of our employees. Sponsor research includes grants and contracts from federal, state, and non-governmental entity, and makes up approximately 14.5%. And rounding out the sources of revenues is miscellaneous sources, which includes student federal and state aid, auxiliary enterprises, athletics, endowment, and investment income, which accounts for approximately 15.8% of the annual revenue budget. I will now move on to tuition fees and financial aid. As we go through each of these slides, the amounts noted refer to the annual tuition fee before student aid discounting, or what we refer to as total price. For the portion of this presentation, we will compare our annual tuition and fee amounts at Rutgers, New Brunswick to the Big Ten public universities, and Rutgers, Newark, and Camden to the senior public institutions of higher education in New Jersey. This budget proposes a 2.9% increase for tuition and a 2.9% increase for mandatory fees for most of the undergraduate and graduate programs. For students choosing to live on campus, room, board, and residential educational fees will increase based on the type of room and meal plan that is selected. For Rutgers, New Brunswick, we look at our Big Ten as our peer competitors. When we look at the FY22 amount for in-state undergraduates, our total price puts us in the top half of these schools, but within approximately $1,000 of the next three schools found in this chart. For Rutgers, Camden, and Newark, we look at the New Jersey senior public institutions of higher education. When we look at the FY22 amount for in-state undergraduates, our total price puts us in the top half of these schools, but within approximately $800 of the next three schools found in the chart. This chart displays Rutgers FY22 room rates for double occupancy rooms, along with meal plans that have the highest number of students selecting the plan at each campus. Rutgers takes into consideration local housing options and pricing benchmarks in establishing our on-campus housing rate. This is one of many considerations that are used in developing the rates each year. So thus far, all the information presented for each campus has been gross costs. These costs are easily comparable from school to school as these rates are publicly reported. However, a great number of Rutgers students do not pay full price. We put a high priority on keeping Rutgers affordable by providing our students with institutional student aid, qualifying state and federal aid, and grant programs. There are many ways that Rutgers students and their families are able to reduce out-of-pocket costs. This slide takes a look at the student level at each campus. More than 75% of our undergraduate students received some form of financial aid. For example, although the total costs for Rutgers, New Brunswick were defined as over $24,700, based on previous year data, the average price to a first-year in-state student receiving aid in that year was approximately 48% of the total cost. When we take this same view to the other campuses, in Newark, the percentage was 44%, and in Camden, it was approximately 39%. On a national level, the student loan default rate is seen as an indicator of a university's value and ability to prepare its students for a career. Rutgers graduates have a student loan default rate below the national average and the state average, which underscores the value of Rutgers education and the ability of our graduates to enter the workforce at salary levels sufficient to repay financial obligations. I will now turn the presentation over to Mr. Gower.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. I would like to provide the board some ideas or considerations around what I call the headwinds, as well as some opportunities regarding the budget that we are presenting to you today. I expected this to be a difficult year, as evidenced by the fact that it is a deficit budget that we brought to you. In areas such as revenue and financial aid, we have enrollment uncertainties. In New Brunswick, for instance, out-of-state and international enrollments have not gotten back to where they were pre-pandemic. In Newark and Camden, we have challenges around transfer students, in particular the impact of the county college enrollments in New Jersey, which is also a nationwide phenomenon, as they would come to us in the third and fourth year. And then coming down the line, but pretty quickly, is the impending cliff on the declines in traditional high school graduates. There are opportunities, however, for enrollment, not just trying to address those that I mentioned head on, but looking at new programs and program delivery opportunities. These have startup time, but they are certainly within our view. Reaching out to those who've stepped out of higher education without a degree and bring them back, convince them that it's important to come back and to finish their educations. And then other non-traditional students. We also have opportunities in new financial aid programs, in addition to ones such as Run to the Top and Bridging the Gap that have been in place for some time in Newark and Camden respectively. We have the new Scarlet Guarantee program starting this fall in Rutgers, New Brunswick, as well as the Garden State Guarantee, which is the new support that we've gotten from New Jersey. The only new support we've gotten for operations for third and fourth year students who qualify for that. So that is a wonderful opportunity for some of the neediest students in the state to come to Rutgers and get an education here. We have issues around pricing I'll come back to. We also have issues around exhausting our federal support. The last of the federal and state relief funds we used in fiscal 23. We've carried forward $58 million to soften the blow of support cost increases that needs to be absorbed down the line. We have concerns about expenditures. We've talked before about compensation and related fringe benefit costs represent 65% of our budget. This budget absorbs one compensation increase for existing collective negotiation agreements that was provided mid-year fiscal 22, plus an unknown salary program for fiscal 23 because of collective negotiations that are underway. In terms of fringe benefit rates, noted that this is already the highest by far in the Big Ten and maybe anywhere in the US. And we have included in this budget another planned scheduled increase based on state guidance for fiscal '23. We're hopeful that relief will be coming for against the issue of fringe benefit costs. There are a variety of discussions before the legislature, and we remain optimistic that the state will help us address that. We have concerns over the Great Resignation. That resignation of positions throughout the university has helped the budget this year, but it has stressed operations and stressed the coverage that we need for key activities. And we're also finding that we are often filling those vacancies with higher paid individuals costing more net because of the competition in the marketplace. So overall, we are still adjusting to what the next normal is impacted by the pandemic. And then there is the impact of inflation. There is a specific impact as shown by increase in board rates, particularly in Rutgers, New Brunswick, which is at 5%. We've had a dramatic increase in food costs, above 21% for key commodities. We are looking at an increase for New Brunswick of 5%. That just touches the problem. As the president indicated, if we were to price to inflation, it would be considerably higher than that. We've noted already that, or we recognize that commodities from supplies throughout the university to energy could be very impactful this year, and inflation in general impacting everything else, including our employees' buying power. The pricing issue, as the president referred to earlier, we cannot raise tuition to keep up with inflation. We cannot price to match inflation. That would be detrimental to our access and affordability goals and detrimental to our students and families. Since the only other major funding item, state appropriations, has been generally flat, except for the support for financial aid, we're limited in what we can do. So we are seeing multi-year efforts to adjust to the next normal. I think these will take at least 2 to 3 years. Options are new revenue programs and other services. These often take time to ramp up. They must be undertaken immediately. Reducing our cost structure and making the university more efficient by reducing duplication, assessing services, and looking for opportunities there. We must take forward any available balances from the current year and reserves to allow ourselves time to do these things and redouble our efforts in other sources such as fundraising. All these headwinds I referred to sound pessimistic. I am not pessimistic. I remain optimistic that this university, from my experience in almost 9 years, rises to the occasion. I think we have great opportunities here to address these. It will take time, it will take work, it will take hard decisions. But as I say, I remain quite optimistic about our ability to meet these challenges. Mr. Banks, that concludes our reports.
Thank you, Mr. Gower, and thank you, Mr. Moore. I move the resolution for approval of the fiscal year 2022-2023 working budget as found under tab C.
Thank you, Chair Banks. May I have a second, please? Is there discussion of this motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please so signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? The budget resolution is passed.
Chair. Mr. Moore then presented for endorsement proposed resolutions to set tuition, mandatory student fees, room rates, and board rates for fiscal year 2022-2023. These included proposed tuition increases of 2.9% for typical undergraduate programs, proposed mandatory student fee increases of 2.9%, proposed increases to housing, room rates, and residence education fees of 3%, and proposed increases to dining board plan rates of up to 5% for student dining for plans operations managed by Rutgers. Student rates for other academic programs are identified under tab D. I move the resolutions for approval of tuition rates for fiscal year 2022-2023 as noted in tab D, mandatory student fees as noted in tab E, and room and board rates along with the residence education fees as noted in tab F.
Thank you, Chair Banks. May I have a second, please? Thank you. Is there any discussion of these motions? Hearing none, all in favor, please so signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motions pass.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. J. Michael Gower, Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer and University Treasurer, presented for endorsement a proposed resolution approving the creation of a subsidiary limited liability company of Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, that will allow the university to maximize its potential revenue generation. The resolution is on the consent agenda. Mr. Gower presented for endorsement two proposed resolutions associated with sole source contracts. Contract with Explorance Corporation for the Blue all-in-one evaluation platform, which will allow the university the ability to receive anonymous course assessments and survey responses, and contract with Ginkgo Bioworks, Inc. for COVID-19 testing with University Correctional Healthcare Services. These resolutions are on the consent agenda. And finally, under matters for information, Mr. Tony Calcado, Executive Vice President for Strategic Planning and Operations and Chief Operating Officer, gave a report on the proposed Rutgers Health Complex, commonly referred to as the Hub. He shared with the committee the building layout and entities that will share space at this location. In the facility, there will be space for translational research, the Robert Wood Johnson Medical School, an innovation hub, and a vivarium. Further, on the first floor, there will be space for mixed use as well as retail space. Mr. J. Michael Gower, Executive Vice President, Chief Financial Officer, and University Treasurer, gave an update on the fiscal year 2022 financial projections. Ms. Vivian Fernandez, Senior Vice President for Human Resources, presented on the Future of Work Task Force and its recommendations for the President's consideration. Ms. Fernandez described the work that has been conducted over the last year on the future of work, including over 29,000 touch points with the campus community on this topic through surveys, focus groups, and a virtual listening tour. She concluded her presentation with a list of next steps that will take place over the summer and fall semester months. This will include the improved short-term recommendations, operationalized, and the feasibility assessment, and the operationalization of the approved long-term recommendations starting in 2023. Mr. Chair, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Chair Banks. Thank you very much. Committee on Audit, Chair Taylor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Committee on Audit met on June 1st, 2022 in a hybrid manner of in-person and Zoom. Ms. Shelley Massey, KPMG Lead Partner, and Ms. Lauren Swigard, KPMG Senior Manager, presented a status update. Ms. Massey confirmed that all reports related to the year ended June 30th, 2021 had been issued. Ms. Swigard reviewed the details of the 2022 audit plan, discussing the timeline, risk assessment, and the analysis of certain accounting standards. In addition, Ms. Massey highlighted KPMG's enhancements to its use of technology, as well as the impact on the financial statement audit from recent changes to accounting and auditing standards. Ms. Kimberly Pasfa, Secretary of the University, reviewed the requirements of the university's conflict of interest policy for each member of the Board of Governors, Board of Trustees, Camden Board of Directors, and each university officer. In addition, she mentioned the additional requirement of the Board of Governors to complete an online form and ethics training required by the state of New Jersey. Mr. J. Michael Gower, Executive Vice President, Chief Financial Officer, and University Treasurer, and Dr. Angela Buchel, Senior Vice President, Administration and Chief of Staff, Office of the President, provided an update on the university's Enterprise Risk Management Program. Ms. Michelle Noren, Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer, and Mr. Guy Albertini, Associate Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer, provided an update on the accomplishments and plans of the university's first Chief Information Security Officer. Mr. Eugene Simon, Associate Vice President and Deputy Chief Enterprise Risk Management, Ethics, and Compliance Officer, provided a status update on the university's privacy program. Ms. Ruth Philo, Chief Audit Executive, informed the committee on the status of the 2022 annual audit plan and provided highlights from recently completed reviews and the implementation status of recommendations for past audits. The committee then met in private session with Mr. Gower, Mr. John J. Hoffman, General Counsel, and Ms. Philo. The committee then also met in private session with Mr. Gower, and Mr. Hoffman. Mr. Chair, this concludes my report on the Committee on Audit.
Thank you very much, Chair Taylor. Chair Towers, please, for the Committee on Health Affairs.
Dr. Doherty on this.
Committee on Health Affairs met on May 26th in person and virtually. Dr. Frank Genasi, President and Chief Executive Officer of University Behavioral Health Care and University Correctional Health Care, cited 3 matters that require the committee's endorsement to move forward for Board of Governors approval. 1, the minutes of the University Behavioral Health Care Leadership Committee meeting as of January 18th, 2022. 2, the University Behavioral Health Care staff appointments, reappointments, and clinical privileges of March 23rd, 2022. And 3, University Behavioral Health Care's medical staff bylaws of March 2022. These 3 matters were endorsed by the committee and will be moved under the consent agenda. Dr. Genasi then provided a brief update of the University Behavioral Health Care and began by highlighting the virtual inauguration to welcome Trinitas Regional Medical Center into the RWJ Barnabas Health System. Dr. Genasi also discussed funds received for early intervention support services programs in Newark and Middlesex, as well as plans to file for additional funding for Somerset and Hunterdon counties. Dr. Genasi then reviewed grants recently reviewed by UBHC, which included a community mental health centers grant from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, which will provide support to underserved communities in New Brunswick that were impacted by COVID-19, as well as a grant received by the Behavioral Research and Training Institute to run zero suicide training for the Division of Mental Health and Addiction Services. He added that UBHC continues to struggle with recruiting and retaining clinical and non-clinical faculty, reflecting the national trend, and that he is working closely with human resources on recruitment and talent acquisition. Dr. Ethan Halm, inaugural Vice Chancellor of Population Health for RBHS and Deputy Chief Population Health Officer of RWJ Barnabas Health, provided an overview of population health and his vision as Vice Chancellor. He explained that healthcare is moving towards population health, elaborated on the distinction between public health and population health, and reviewed the shift from volume-based care to value-based care and the implications of that transition. He then reviewed his role as Vice Chancellor for Population Health and discussed early progress that has been made in building his team. There was then a presentation from the School of Nursing Camden. Dr. Donna Nikitas, Dean of the Rutgers School of Nursing Camden, provided an update to the committee. She explained that the School of Nursing is structured around centers of excellence and is dedicated to embedding clinical education in the city of Camden through the Center for Interprofessional Education Practice. She also highlighted the school's Care Center, which provides academic advisement and an infrastructure for student success. Dean Nikitas then reviewed recent changes to the school's mission to reflect the strategic plan, new hires within the school, and enrollment numbers. Dean Nikitas then discussed federal and state grants, discussed recent accreditation and recertification of programs within the school, shared news about national recognitions received by the school's faculty members, and concluded her presentation with an overview of the school's 5-year strategic plan, enrollment trends, and a financial overview. The Rutgers Health Update. Dr. Vincente Gracias, Senior Vice Chancellor for Clinical Affairs and Vice President for Health Affairs, updated the Committee on Rutgers Health. He began his presentation by recognizing the achievements of the RBHS VAX Corps and the Rutgers Health Service Corps, which earned the Beloved Community Award from the Committee to Advance Our Common Purpose. He then discussed student and employee health and wellness, highlighted surveys and their results, and discussed updates on the RBHS Wellness Program website. He also shared highlights of an accreditation council for graduate medical education site visit and discussed various initiatives, including an evidence-based professionalism program as well as others related to care for the caregiver, second victim syndrome, and education on disparities and racism in the clinical space. He also updated the Committee on University Hospital in Newark, discussed the Screen NJ Cancer Screening Program, and concluded his presentation by sharing data from key performance indicators. The Chancellor's report. Dr. Brian Strom, Chancellor for RBHS and Executive Vice President for Health Affairs, provided his Chancellor's report. He discussed the RBHS strategic plan and reviewed its 5 unifying themes and 4 mission-based themes. He stated that the next step will feature a retreat of RBHS leadership, which will include the planning of a structure in terms of committees, dashboards, and metrics to follow accomplishments. Chancellor Strom then discussed new appointments and key departures within RBHS, including the appointment of Dr. Amy Murtha as the new Dean of the Robert Wood Johnson Medical School, beginning on August 15th, 2022. Chancellor Strom then updated the committee on the construction of the Rutgers Health Complex on the site formerly known as the Hub, which he said will be home to corporate space, the medical school, and a translational research facility. He concluded his report by sharing data on COVID-19 and reviewed the number of cases in the United States, New Jersey's vaccination rates, and case rates at Rutgers. And finally, the financial update. Ms. Kathleen Bramwell, Senior Vice Chancellor of Finance and Administration, provided an update on the RBHS budget, which included RBHS overall performance, as well as significant variances within the budget and the reason for those variances. Mr. Chair, this concludes my report on the Committee of Health Affairs.
Thank you, Dr. Doherty. Thank you very much. The Committee on Intercollegiate Athletics Chair, Mr. Brown, has deferred to Mr. Hundley for today because we need one last committee report. Kind sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Committee on Intercollegiate Athletics held a special teleconference meeting on May 23rd, 2022 to review the proposed terms for a contract for head women's basketball coach. Mr. Patrick Aaup, Director of Intercollegiate Athletics, explained that after a thorough search conducted by Collegiate Sports Solutions, Ms. Coquise Washington was chosen to be the next head coach of the Rutgers women's basketball program. He detailed Ms. Washington's coaching success and reviewed the terms of the proposed contract. Following a detailed discussion, the committee agreed to endorse the proposed contract, and the meeting was closed. The committee met again on June 7th, virtually via Zoom, and was chaired by Chair Greg Brown, called to order at 10 a.m. and adjourned at 11:30. Mr. Jeffrey Dean, Director of Athletics and Recreational Services for Rutgers Camden, provided his annual report to the committee. He first presented an overview of the conferences Rutgers Camden teams compete in and noted that Rutgers Camden was able to administer all 17 of its programs throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Dean then provided the committee with an update on the campus facilities and highlighted recent successes of coaches, assistant coaches, and athletics, including Jude Misko, who won back-to-back national championships in the hammer throw. Mr. Dean then reviewed improvements to grade point averages, recognition students, athletes have earned, and the accomplishments of the Student Athlete Advisory Committee. A sports update was provided by Mr. Hasim Phillips, Associate Athletic Director for Media and Public Relations, who announced that this past academic athletic season will most likely be the most successful in Rutgers history. Mr. Phillips noted that the university had 9 nationally ranked programs during the same academic year for the first time in history, and that 10 programs participated in NCAA postseason competitions. He also highlighted 3 track and field athletes who competed in the NCAA track and field championships, as well as the success of the men's lacrosse team, which made its second appearance in the Big Ten Championship and advanced to the Final Four in the NCAA tournament. The baseball team, which won a program record 44 games, and as President Holloway noted, was robbed, was ranked in the top 25 for the first time since 2010 and advanced to the Big Ten tournament for the first time. And the women's lacrosse team, which set a program record with 16 wins, advanced to the Big Ten championship game for the first time and earned its second consecutive NCAA tournament appearance. He added that the rowing team set a program record by earning 6 medals in the Big Ten championships. Athletic director update was given by Mr. Hobbs, director of intercollegiate athletics for Rutgers University, New Brunswick, who announced that Sean Tucker is returning to Rutgers in the role as vice president for athletic fundraising and deputy athletic director. Mr. Hobbs also updated the committee on funding from the division's marketing partners and updated the committee members on developments within the Big Ten. Mr. Matt Cogliovanni, Senior Associate Athletic Director for Facilities, Events, and Operations, reviewed planned facilities upgrades to SHI Stadium, Ursac Stadium, and the baseball and softball facilities. Following that, Ms. Lisa Terrell, Associate Director for Brand Marketing and Business Development, stated that Rutgers Title IX celebration launched on May 15, 2022, and will continue until May 15, 2023. She shared a timeline of events as well as plans for June 23rd, 2022, which marks the anniversary of the passing of Title IX legislation. Ms. Terrell explained that all sports teams will have a Title IX celebration game and noted that events for the weekend of October 6th will include a women's panel featuring notable alumni, letter winners, and current student athletes. She added that the celebration during the October 7th football game against Nebraska will include a parade down Scarlet Night Way, as well as an all-female student athlete march during halftime. Ms. Terrell explained that the events will continue in the winter and the larger celebrations are planned for an early men's basketball game as well as women's basketball game in February to tie in with the National Girls and Women in Sports Day. The meeting was adjourned approximately 11:30 a.m. Mr. Chair, this concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Hundley. Thank you very much. Chair-elect Bill Best, may I call on you for the consent agenda, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are there any items that the members want to remove from the consent agenda? Upon recommendation of the Executive Committee, Committee on Academic and Student Affairs, the Committee on Finance and Facilities, and the Committee on Health Affairs, Mr. Chair, I move that the board approve the items contained in the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair-elect. Please, may I have a second? Thank you. Any discussion? Any objections? The consent agenda is passed. The report of the Executive Vice President, Chief Financial Officer, and University Treasurer, Mr. Gower, the floor is yours.
Chair, I'm reporting on the meeting of the Joint Committee on Investments on June the 9th, which was held in person and through Zoom. Chief Investment Officer McDonald and representatives of our investment consulting firm, FEG, reviewed the portfolio's current asset allocation, the process regarding the annual review of those allocations. No changes were recommended at this time. Ms. McDonald also conducted the annual review with the committee of the investment policy statement, and no changes were recommended for that as well. Then Mr. McDonald and the representatives from FEG reviewed the long-term investment pool performance over the past few months in the current market environment. Needless to say, that was a difficult set of conversations. It has been a rough period of time for the long-term investment pool following a extraordinary gains last year. But we all must remember that an endowment has a timeline of forever, and we have to remain confident in our asset allocations. That's the point, to be able to ride through difficult times as well as take advantage of opportunities in good times as well, and well-priced opportunities in times such as this. Then the committee considered recommendations totaling $80 million, one into a private equity fund, two into real estate, two into diversifying strategies, and one into opportunistic credit, as well as considering an redemption of $30 million out of an opportunistic credit fund. All these were endorsed by the committee. Mr. McDonald and the representatives of FEG then discussed other updates regarding the portfolio and its managers and previewing the upcoming pipeline of potential investment recommendations. Mr. McDonald then conducted the annual review of spending policy. This was reviewed as well as comparable spending policies from endowments at other universities. No recommendations were made at the time. And then finally, Mr. McDonald presented an update on our intern program, student intern program, which has been highly successful. We have a great number of graduates of these programs have gone on to wonderful opportunities in the finance world, as well as quite a number who are enjoying wonderful internships this summer. I want to take one last moment to thank and congratulate the gentleman to my left. Mr. Oliver and I have had a great working relationship during this term, and even greater friendship. And I just want to take an opportunity to give my best wishes on the completion of his term, as well as on his dissertation preparations. Mr. Chair, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Gower. Thank you very much. Is there any old business? Oops. Just home run after home run over here. The report from the University Senate, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The full Senate met twice on April 29th. These meetings were the first of the next academic year and the last of this academic year. The first meeting of the day was the organizational meeting. The sole purpose of this meeting is to elect the new Senate leadership. I'll let you know more about this shortly. The second meeting on April 29th was the last full Senate for this academic year. In that meeting, the Senate heard from President Holloway with his administrative report. The president spoke about student award recipients, Rutgers Day, the dance marathon, admission trends, and other important information for the university community. We then heard from Chancellor Tillis with his Camden campus report. This was the first time Chancellor Tillis has appeared before the full Senate, and we were delighted to welcome him. We also heard from Dr. Michael Zwick, Senior Vice President for the Office of Research, and his plans and initiatives for his office moving forward. The Senate then conducted the last business of this academic year, voting on a resolution in support of academic freedom and racial, gender, and social justice. We also heard reports on electronic notebooks, the university budget, Senate rules of debate, and heard the first of 3 pending reports on free speech and the University Senate's role. The next time this board meets, the University Senate will have a new leadership team. I'm delighted to introduce you today to the University Senate Chair-elect, Dr. Adrienne Simons. Dr. Simons is on the other side of the room over there. Hopefully she can wave. I can't see her, so I hope she did. Dr. Simons is a faculty member in the School of Health Professions within our BHS. She is joined by our Vice Chair-elect, Ms. Lucille Foster. Ms. Foster is the Assistant Dean at the Rutgers Business School in Newark. I have the utmost respect and admiration for Chair Simons and Vice Chair Foster, and have witnessed some of their thoughts and plans for the next academic year, and I continue to be impressed by them both. I know the Senate is in great hands, and I can't wait to see what they will do. They know they have my best wishes for success, and I have no doubt they will succeed in moving the Senate forward and to new heights. Now, while I know many of you have heard me thank you before, I think it's important to repeat it and acknowledge it each time I see you. And unfortunately, I won't be able to thank everyone right now, but I promise to do that within the next few days personally. First, however, I want to thank President Holloway and his cabinet for their continued support and partnership with the Senate. I think it bears repeating how important and appreciated their support has been. I once again reaffirm my respect and admiration for President Holloway and the entire senior leadership of the university. As I've said many times these last 2 years, his leadership and his humanity are my guidepost. It has been my honor and privilege to work with President Holloway. I'd also like to thank the chancellors. They've shown me both with words and their constant advocacy for their campus, all that campus has to offer in making the whole of Rutgers, and how each campus is vital to telling the Rutgers story. I will always be grateful for the work they do for the benefit of the entire institution. It has been a profound privilege to work with both the Board of Governors and the Board of Trustees. Each of you show your dedication and passion for the university and everything that you do. You represent the finest of Rutgers and define excellence for sure. I'm so glad I was able to experience your passion and your hard work firsthand. I also thank the boards for your warm and genuine welcome of the Senate representatives on committees. You've engaged with those representatives supportively and often sought out their thoughts and feedback. I also thank the committee chairs for seamlessly integrating the Senate representatives into the work of each committee. And finally, I must thank the Board of Governors Chair Engelson and the Board of Trustees Chair Lal for their unwavering support of the Senate. They have been extraordinarily kind to me, always answered my questions, tolerated my ignorance, and shown how much they value shared governance with every interaction. I'm honored to know them both, and I hope they know how grateful I am for their kindness and friendship. I'm excited for Chair Simons to have the opportunity to work with all of you and look forward to the fall. Thank you so much. This concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, John Oliver. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I think I'm safe now. Is there any old business? Is there any new business? Mr. President, as always, the last word is yours.
Thank you very much.
May I have a motion to adjourn? A second?
Second.
Objections? Adjourned. Thank you all very much. Happy summer.